Welcome back to That Is Effin' Weird. On today's episode, we have a guest, but I'm not alone on today's episode. I am Stevenson Longbotom,
I am Clark, aka the Reverend Michael Snakebite.
and today's guest, John, is going to be talking about I'm going to screw this up. Lavinia Fisher. I'm going to try to say it fast. Lavinia Fisher. John has been podcasting for the last 3 years. He has two podcasts. One is The Carolina Storyteller and Velmont the Black Raven Chronicles. One is a paranormal podcast, and the other one is an audio drama. John, thank you for coming on to the podcast and shedding some light on this topic. I've never heard of it. We talked a little bit before the show. Um, I'm really interested in this. Clark, I think, has a little bit of information on this as well. But John, again, thank you for coming on.
Well, hey, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share this story with you guys and share a little bit of background on Charleston and uncover a little bit of the hidden secrets that a lot of people really don't know about the story. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. And like you said, there's probably a lot that goes with this story. We had talked prior to actually doing the episode. And I guess there's a little bit of misconception, or there's like some things that may not be true that people often think are true. So I found that to be, kind of intriguing. So I'm interested. I'm not going to steal your thunder anymore. I'm just going to let you roll right into it. So why don't you tell us about the Miss Fisher?
Okay. Well, to get started, I've got to do a little background on Charleston. It's because you got to understand what Charleston is. Charleston is one of the oldest cities in the United States of America, established in 1635. It's been standing for almost 300 years now, almost 400 years now. Wow, 400 years old. Amazing. It has fought in the Revolutionary War. There's been fights in the Civil War, all kinds of history. Darius Rucker, Bill Murray, call the place home. It's a historic city. There is lots of things that go on there, lots of things that happen. So that's what you got to understand. And not only is it a historic city, but it's a city in the South. So back right after the Revolutionary War, there were cash crops moving in and out. There was a lot of slave trade. There was a lot of rich, affluent white people and rich church-going white people that were focused in that area. And also with it being a city in the South, there weren't nearly as much industrialization. So all of the immigrants that were coming over were kind of going up north, and they were living in cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, places where they had jobs that they were gonna be able to take so that they could earn money when they got off the boats. They weren't as much showing up fresh in Charleston. So in the South, in Charleston particularly, families were kind of old families.
Yeah.
So these people had a way about doing things. And this place, if you've ever seen the show Bridgerton.
I haven't. Clark, have you seen the show?
I have not watched it.
We make a joke that the show Bridgerton could be set in 1700s Charleston.
Okay.
Charleston has the architectural style kind of from Bermuda and from North Florida, and it had the cultural style of Victorian England at the time.
Okay.
And then it also had a lot of very religious folks. So the story that we're talking about is a story of Lavinia Fisher. And Charleston markets her as America's first female serial killer. And I think if you look at the...
And not to interject, but this was something that we had talked about. Like, this is a piece that is, like, technically true, technically not true. Like, I guess I'm sure you're going to get into it. But that's like the piece that is not necessarily accurate.
That's the piece that is 100% fictional, actually.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
But for story's sake, for the first part of the story's sake, Lavinia Fisher was the first female serial killer, and actually, if you look at the timeline, she may be the actual first recorded serial killer in America. Maybe, if the story were true. Now, the story goes is that back in 1806, and so this is just after the Revolutionary War. We're in the middle of our third president. The country is still getting its stuff together. You know, we're still figuring out who we are.
Yep.
And down in Charleston, people start going missing.
Just
basically.
Just like random people, or is it like a specific demographic, or is it like kids, you know?
Incoming merchants.
Incoming. Okay.
They're expecting these merchants to come in to bring goods and money into the town, and they never show up. They just never show up. This starts ticking the townspeople off. They start getting mad. They start complaining to the magistrate. Now, back during that time, we didn't have cars. We didn't have really good roads. Coming to Charleston from the north along the King's Highway, which is considered Highway 17A, you were going to have to cross a ferry at the end of the night. Coming from the west onto the peninsula, you know, it was miles and miles of swamp and woodland with the occasional inn spattered here and there. So if you left Columbia at like noon, you might make Charleston by nightfall. Might. You probably wouldn't. You'd probably end up somewhere near Somerville. But occasionally people, as they were coming, they'd have to stop at these inns. And inns at the time were dotted all along the road. There was like hundreds of them, just every mile or so. You had an inn. And so among these inns was one ran by a man named John Fisher and his wife, Lavinia Fisher. There was the 6 Mile Wayfarer Inn. Now, this was located, of course, 6 miles west of Charleston, headed towards Columbia, in what would now be called North Charleston. And in this inn, they would welcome travelers, serve them a nice hot cup of tea, serve them some food, give them a place to rest. Just like any old inn. Only it wasn't like any old inn. The nice hot cup of tea, Lavinia had a tendency to spike with hemlock or nightshade to help ensure that, you know, people that she wanted to sleep. The bed upon which she put her special guests had a mechanism that dropped it into the floor, dumping the guest onto a pit of spikes, where John would then run down, finish off with an axe, and cover the body with to assist in dispersing it and help with the smell, because bodies generally stink, and you don't want that in a hotel.
Okay. Hold on. Time out. All right. Okay. I don't know if you know this, but I guess I'm just scratching my head as to why. I'm again, I don't know if you're going to get into it, but this doesn't make any sense to me right now that people are just traveling and for no apparent reason, I guess Mr. and Mrs. Fisher would just be, you know, I don't know. Shit, I'm just gonna let you talk because I'm sure you're gonna probably get into it. But why? I'm right now. I'm wondering why, or what's the motive behind just random people. This isn't making any sense to me right now. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's a great business model. What are you talking about? Traveler comes through. See, the travelers would come through. Lavinia would sit them down, like we're sitting down now. she'd have a conversation with them, and she'd find out about what they had with them, what they did, maybe how much money they had. You know,
Oh,
she'd
okay.
find out. That's how you'd get to be a special guest.
Got it. Okay,
You know?
so this
And
there
if
was
you had,
okay.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, so this was something where they wanted what people were bringing with them in some sort of way. Like they didn't have to, I guess, pay for it in any sort of way. Like if you had something that they wanted, you were gonna be sipping some tea and landing on a pile of spikes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
After you paid for the room, understand, they still had to pay for the room. I mean, you weren't getting into the room for free, okay? You were getting robbed both ways.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great business model, you know. You interview people, you show them to your room, you take all that they have, and then you're like, I don't know what happened to the people.
Jeez.
Now, this meant that they didn't have a substantial amount of income, so they became very affluent. The people of the town had no clue what they were. They were considered to be high, upstanding people. Lavinia was always very, composed and, chin up, always genial and kind and just this perfect vision of womanhood. Nobody ever talked about Lavinia. If they ever did cross her, though, she always had this, look. This woman might kill you in your sleep. I mean, this look. It wasn't that she might come and stab you in your sleep. It's that you would wake up laying there and this was your sleep paralysis demon ripping your soul out kind of thing, you know? She had this ability to terrify with a look, but she also had the ability to just completely melt you with a smile. Very complex woman, Lavinia. Anyway.
I'm trying to look up pictures of her. I mean, I get for the time period, yeah, they didn't have cameras, obviously, so a lot of things were, well, they might have had cameras, but I'm trying to look up what she looked like. There's one that looks like it's a painting of her. I'm gonna drop it in the one of our channels so everyone can take a look. And this is what she looked like. And you can tell me if this is accurate or not. Is this who we're talking about?
Let me see if I can see the channel. You can get over here and see.
Should be in podcast.
Where'd you drop it?
Podcast photos.
So that is what they say she looks like.
Okay.
Remember, we're telling the false story first, and then I'm going to get into the actual real story.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that and we'll get into some other parts of the story, I'm sure. But that is what they say she looked like.
Okay.
What we discovered, and I say we, and I'm just going to go ahead and reveal who my cohorts are. I've been working with a composer named Savannah Cash, who was actually writing has written a musical on Lavinia. Another author named Bruce Orr, who's a very famous historian from Charleston, and a couple of other authors who were writing about Lavinia. And we uncovered a whole mess of stuff, and we were just like, oh, no wonder they tell the story the way they tell it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. There's a huge twist to the end of this.
Ooh,
but Lavinia,
okay.
of course. What were you saying?
Oh no, I was just reacting to that. Okay.
Oh, I thought Chad said something, but I guess I missed it. Lavinia, of course, is, just, as I was saying, she's this prim and proper woman in Charleston as far as everybody was concerned. Nobody suspected her. She was a pillar of the community. And John just kind of slunk around behind her. You know?
Okay.
He was, the kind to do whatever his wife said,
Yeah.
He was he was along for the ride.
Okay. So this was
Now,
something, because you were kind of saying too that, like, when we were talking about this story, it's not Mr. and Mrs. Fisher or John Fisher. It's about her. So I can only imagine that she was the mastermind, and this was probably all of her idea. And you might get it a little bit into that, or you're just saying it right now that he was not the one who kind of came up with this. He was following her lead.
by the story,
Okay.
Lavinia Fisher was a psychotic mastermind perpetrating this master plan. And it was working beautifully because all of Charleston bought her as this wonderful woman. She was a pillar of the community. So as everybody is getting mad about what she's doing, the magistrate can't do nothing because he can't find anything. There's no evidence. There's no bodies lying around. Nothing's popping up dead.
So is this something that, like, rumors are starting to spread now? Like, after, like, a handful of merchants aren't showing up, people start kind of pointing the finger at her, but they just can't.
Oh, no.
Okay.
They never pointed the finger at her.
Okay.
Never once. In fact, they were sure it was somebody else. So this mob gets together. This mob starts marching their way west, stopping at every inn along the way, every possible place, searching and looking for things. They want to know what's been going on here. They go through a few of them, don't have any problems until they get to the 5 Mile Inn. Well, actually, I don't know what it was called, but it was an inn at about 5 miles outside of town.
Okay.
This one just happened to be a couple of the cohorts who were helping John and Lavinia cover up and get rid of some of the larger items that might have been harder to hide if you were looking for stolen merchandise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay.
So they were profiting off of what Lavinia was doing. They were part of the whole gang. And these two guys didn't want to get caught, so they refused to come out to the mob. Angry mobs doing what angry mobs do, they set the place on fire with the guys inside.
No, okay.
They watched it burn to the ground, and then they continued to march on. Their next stop.
Wait. So they set this inn on fire and just burned 2 people alive?
Oh, no. They thought they burned 2 people alive, but the 2 people got out the back and took off running.
Got it.
That was the part I was going to get to in a minute.
Sorry, I'm going to shut up. Sorry.
No. It's all good. So this place burns to the ground. They waste a couple of hours watching. They go into the next place that they're going. The next place that they're going to stop is the 6 Mile Wayfair Inn, owned by John Fisher and ran by Lavinia. Sorry, Lavinia, don't come and haunt me. And it's at this point that we have to get into the fact that there was kind of an underground network, as I was saying. And when these 2 gents got their house burned down, they hauled butt through the back door and told John and Lavinia what was going on. And they're freaking out. And Lavinia's just a stone cold fox, like, no. Calm your butt down. Be quiet. Told them 2 to hide. And she waited patiently. And as soon as the mob arrived, she stepped out to welcome them, allowed them into her home, and offered them refreshments and everything. She was just like, how can I be of service to you?
Yeah.
They didn't even really search the place. They did go through the kitchen. They went through a room where they would slaughter a cow, and they saw the cow. Didn't pay too much attention to it. That'll come up later. But they just didn't pay attention. They were just, everything was fine. The mob got the refreshments. They got, some water, and they were ready to go back to mob it. They weren't stopping until they found their culprits. They didn't believe that those two guys were the last culprits. They thought there had to be more at work than this. So
was it something that they were they burnt that place down, the 5 Mile Inn, because they knew that they were helping whoever.
They had no clue what they were doing. It's just the people at the 5 Mile Inn refused to allow them to search.
Okay.
And if they were going to search, they were going to destroy it.
So
and
it's
any evidence, by the way, any evidence gone. Oof,
I was gonna say that seemed kind of not smart on the mob's hand, because if the two guys were the ones behind everything, okay, well, they just burnt everything up. I mean, I know, like, if there's any remains or anything like that, those might have, hung around, but still, like, any goods, anything like that, are probably now gone. So they didn't. If you refused to come out when the mob came, they were gonna burn your place down, regardless.
I get what you're saying, dude. I really do, but you got to remember, these were 1800s Americans, common folk.
Yeah.
Real salt of the earth people. The clay that America was built on.
Yeah, and I get that. I get where it's times are different and everything, and a mob is a mob. A big group of people. I mean, it's almost like riots. You can't, like, it's not something that's organized or anything like that. Things are gonna, whatever happens. Clark, what are your thoughts and everything so far about what's going on?
Well, just to touch on what you were just asking, yeah, if you think about it, this is these people's livelihoods they're messing with, and like they don't have time for speculation or courts and justice like that. They were marching out as a mob because every merchant that doesn't appear in Charleston is more money out of their pockets. I mean, these are barkeeps, tavern owners, cobblers, blacksmiths, whatever their trade might be, or even people that are shipping goods out. Charleston being one of the largest port cities, pretty much. I mean, still to this day, really, if you think about it. But at this time, especially critical port city at this time. And yeah, I mean, like I said, every time these people are coming in, that's the economy moving. That's money out of people's pockets. And I mean, even today, people don't. You're gonna, if somebody's directly messing with your income, you're gonna handle business. That's just kind of human nature.
What the piece that doesn't make sense to me, right, is like, okay, I get you're angry, but burning a place down is not gonna help. Why not? And I'm not saying go and do this or anything like that, but what I don't understand is, like, all right, if you were so angry at these people for not letting you in, why not just break down the door and then take everything that they have, or, like, force your way in? I mean, I can't imagine that these were made out of the inn was made out of, like, steel and brick. I'm sure it was just like a wooden house or wooden, there's a mob of people. Like, okay, how many people? We're talking a mob. In my mind, I'm just thinking like Frankenstein and, like, hundreds of people. Is this something where it's like only like 10 or 15 people, or is this like, okay, no, there was like 50 to 100 people mobbing?
My understanding is that it was a significant number of people. I've heard in the upwards of 50. I've also heard it was around 20. But my understanding was that it was a large mob that was out there hunting for these people, an organized posse.
Okay.
Armed with guns and everything. And I do think one of the reasons that they burned the place down was they just weren't going to have a fight on their hands. They weren't fighting anybody. You didn't want to comply. It was a scorched earth policy.
Interesting. Okay.
They were tired of it. I mean, it's like Clark said. Charleston was a port city. Charleston had a lot of money passing in and out, a lot of money changing hands. And as a famous and very wise man once said, You play with my money, you play with my emotions.
Hmm.
And that is what happened. They played with the money and played with the emotions. And they reached Lavinia Fisher, and Lavinia Fisher was like, you know what, I understand. Playing with my money is playing with my emotions too.
So she
Good
let
luck
them
to you all.
so she let them in, open arms and everything, into her house. Now I think, I think we see that even nowadays. I watch, like, the investigation, or not invest. What is it? I think it's called like ID, Investigation Discovery. It's the crime channel, on TV, and I feel like I more often than not, I see episodes where like people, like murder someone, but then they end up like helping people try to search for this person, and they're all like, "Oh no, I'm making flyers. We're trying to get the word out there." So I feel like I'm seeing a lot of that in Lavanya.
And this is the reason they called Lavinia a psychopath, and that's part of psychopathy, is the need to kind of be kind of involved. Lavinia didn't have to talk to everybody. Lavinia could have just been like, "Oh my, do what you got to do, go on your way." She didn't have to do a big deal to convince them she wasn't guilty, but she wanted to be involved. And it's something that they do mark up with serial killers of the psychopathy. Is one of the things they like to do is to get into the investigation when they're looking for them. They like to stick their nose where it doesn't belong. They can't help it. It's a compulsion. So her actions kind of play into that belief in just how psychopathy works.
I mean, if you think about it, it's almost kind of a strategy as well to have if to be involved as the person who's doing all of this, be a part of it, so you can kind of track what they know, what they don't know, so if you're safe or not, or if any eyes start looking at you, you can try to persuade them a different way. It's actually very smart, for someone to try to do that. I'm gonna help out with it. And I don't know if that was like her thought process or if that's how it goes, but to me that's very clever and that's very smart to be involved as the one who's committing all these crimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And back then they didn't have a study of the human mind or how it works, so it was an instant throw.
Mm-hmm.
It was so much of an instant throw that as they're traveling out, it's coming to the end of the day, they're not stopping. But they realize they need to report back. They did just do some property damage, kind of a minor thing. So they needed to send someone back. So the youngest of them, a boy named David Smith, was left there with Lavinia and John to rest up and then to run back to Charleston 6 miles and tell the people in Charleston what they were doing, what successes they've had, how far they've reached, where they were going next. Kind of just, be the messenger boy.
Yep.
And so the mob's on. David stays there in the house. Lavinia offers him some refreshments, goes into the other room. David's sitting there enjoying his refreshments, having a lovely time, preparing to rest his legs before running back to Charleston. And, he kind of closes his eyes for a minute, and then he opens his eyes. And there's John Fisher and the 2 guys whose house he just helped burn down. He is now in a room with 3 people who do not look like they like him at all. And they proceed to just beat on him. This young 20-year-old boy, these grown men are just throwing hands as fast as they can. And Lavinia walks into the room as if she was bringing more refreshments. And they stop. And he looks at her and he goes, "Please, please, help me. I don't know why they're doing this. Please, help me." She kind of sits her tray down, calmly walks over to him, and then the switch flips. Like, instantly. She just goes into this mad fury, starts screaming, and just starts beating him with everything she's worth about the head, the face, scratching him. So he dives out the front window and takes off running. She sends John and the other two to go after him. They go running down, chasing him towards Charleston. Hopefully their plan is to catch him and kill him.
Yeah.
Now, here the story passes for a few hours. Obviously, the three men that work with Lavinia are out chasing this young boy as he's running to Charleston to tell on them. And Lavinia is just there at home doing housely things when in walks the next player, a merchant, a very wealthy man by the name of John Peoples. John Peoples was a, very wealthy young man from up Columbia way. And he was coming down to Charleston to do a lot of trading, spend a lot of money, and make a lot of people a lot of money. Lavinia welcomed him into the home, spoke with him, found out who he was, and of course decided that she wanted in on some of that money. So she offered John a cup of tea. We all know that tea was not regular tea.
Yeah.
John doesn't like tea. He's never been a fan of tea. John prefers coffee.
Yep.
John prefers lemonade. John just doesn't like tea. This one thing probably saved John's life. So when Lavinia's not looking, he dumps the tea into a plant and goes, "Oh, wow, that was really great tea. Thank you so much." Lavinia smiles now that he's finished his tea and shows him up to his bedroom for the night. Very, very lavish looking, nice bedroom, he thinks, considering he didn't spend that much money to stay here.
Yeah.
Things are getting a little weird. Lavinia was asking a lot of iffy questions. The bedroom's a little overly nice. So he decides he's going to sleep in a chair, not in the bed. You don't get to be a very wealthy man in the 1800s without being a little shifty sometimes, And John knows something's up. His nose is twitching. Middle of the night happens. John Fisher comes back, tells Lavinia they can't find the boy. And Lavinia tells John, "Save it, we have one in the bedroom." They're having this conversation. She says, "Get in the basement and get ready." Now, this conversation is just hushed whispers through the walls of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But it awakes John Peoples. And as he's waking up and trying to figure out what's going on because he's hearing some kind of argument, all of a sudden he hears these loud, mechanized, cranking noises, and the bed just drops out of sight. It just drops. And he goes and he looks into the hole, and down there in the hole is John Fisher holding an axe over, this pit of spikes. And so Peebles quickly, he grabs his stuff, jumps out the window, grabs his horse, and he rides for Charleston like a madman. Just takes off to Charleston. So Peebles is on horseback. David Smith is on foot. David Smith has got a few hours on him. But lo and behold, they arrive at the magistrate in Charleston about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And they present this crazy story of what's going on and what happened to them and what they found at the Fisher's place to the magistrate. The magistrate now has evidence. He has 2 eyewitness accounts of, 1, an attempted murder, and 2, a blatant assault from this outlaw gang. Something is going on at that house, and it seems to be the answer to all of his questions. So he gets another posse together of actual certified lawmen, and they ride out to the 6 Mile Wayfair Inn. They don't march out, they ride out. Fully armed, ready to go. Guns and glory as it was going to be. They were taking the Fishers alive or dead.
So this was something that, like, no kidding, the same day, both of these people got away from the Fishers. Like, is the timeline for this, like, all in the same time? Like, the mob came there, did their search, nothing.
All in one day.
That's insane. Okay.
They happened to have the worst possible day they could have. And, you know, by now it's the next day. Because, like I said, the guys had to run all the way back.
Yeah.
They had to tell the story, had to get a thing together. It takes a few hours. Come back. It's now early morning the next day. The mob is still off mobbing because they have no idea what's going on. And they arrive at the Fisher's place. And Lavinia kind of walks out all prim and proper. And, you know, the magistrate's there. They've all got guns drawn. They're ready to, you know, just light them up. And before Lavinia can even speak, John Fisher comes running out. Tears welling up in his eyes. Please, please don't shoot my wife. I confess we did it. I'm sorry. I confess. Please don't kill her. Basically surrendering for all four of them.
No way.
Oh yeah, he was a sniveling idiot. He was devoted to Lavinia. He was so devoted to her. In fact, that we'll go forward with the story and you'll understand.
Okay.
So finally, proper law enforcement goes in and searches this home. Now that the Fisher gang is in custody, one of the first things they find is a half-butchered calf that had been reported stolen from a farm down the road a week ago. The same cow that the mob had just walked past. Then they begin to find personal items from so many people just sitting around. Then they go down in the basement and they start finding the remains of the bodies. And then they find the mechanism that drops the bed. And then they start to realize what it is. It's a house of horrors. There's just so much death. And like any good law enforcement officer would, the magistrate decided that the preservation of the evidence was completely unimportant. They burned that fricker down.
Oh, God.
Torched it, burned it to the ground. Who needs the evidence, right? Burned it to the ground. At this point, Lavinia and John were taken into custody. They were tried in Charleston, found guilty. They filed an appeal. In between the guilty verdict and their appeal, John Fisher actually broke out of jail. They were kept at the old city jail in Charleston. They were kept there in between. It was 6 months between the trial and the appeal. They were tried, of course, for murder. Sentenced to be hanged. They appealed. John Fisher breaks out of jail with a couple of his buddies. His buddies run off and get away. John can't get Lavinia out and stays there outside the jail, a free man at the time, because he can't get Lavinia out until he gets captured several hours later, because Lavinia wasn't able to escape with him. He was that devoted to his wife that he actually would not leave her. The appeal, of course, fails, and the day of the execution comes. They are marched down the street one at a time to the hangman's gallows. John goes first, and as John is marched down the street, people are throwing tomatoes and rocks and everything at him, and he's just being pelted and booed. And he gets up on the gallows, and of course they priest does the last rites, and the guy asks if he has any last words, and like every man who's ever been married says, John, in his most sincere voice, says, he made me do it. Then it comes time for Lavinia to go, and Lavinia demanded that she have her finest, best dress that her mother had kept for her, the wedding gown that she wore. She demanded that she be allowed to wear that. And so she steps out of the jail, or out of where she was being held, with her head held high, looking like a princess as she walked the streets, her hands held together, her head held up, and the crowd was silent. They were in awe. If someone went to throw something, she shot them that death glance, and they just froze. Nobody booed. Nobody said anything. Nobody threw anything. She walked as if she owned the city. All the way up the steps of the gallows, the crowd was silent. The preacher went to give her last rites, and she told the preacher to save it. She didn't need him. They asked if she had any last words, and she looked out at the crowd and said, if you have a message for the devil, give it to me, for I will meet him directly. And then she stepped off the gallows, hanging herself, robbing the hangsman of his duty. Now, the ghost story is that Lavinia's ghost walks the city of Charleston in that fine white dress at night, and she still haunts the old city jail, where I first heard this story over 20 years ago. Well, the old city jail is a whole nother story. But that is the tourist story of Lavinia Fisher.
Yes, and there are like so many great Southern crime stories and ghost stories. There's so many different ways to tell it. There's so many layers. There's so much. I don't know. It's definitely one of those things where one of the I call it like some of the greatest telephone games in history because they're repeated and told so many ways, and there's really just a certain era of it. And I would encourage listeners, if you are in the area or just have ever wanted to visit Charleston, South Carolina, definitely go on one of those ghost tours, not just to hear stories like this, but just it's different when you're there. There's a certain heaviness in the air. There's a certain just kind of mystique to the city itself. And when you hear these stories, you get a different feeling of it being around you than you do necessarily just hearing a good tale. Because like I said, you can go anywhere you want, in old cities in Europe or anywhere in the country really that claims to have, ghosts, and there's certain places that just have an energy to them. But there's something about like an old Southern ghost story or a crime story, and in this case, or both. When you're actually in the place, you can almost feel the energy, and yeah, there's so many great details to this story, and people might want to question it or pick it apart, but that's something. One of the beauties of these stories is you kind of give it with a wink and say, choose to believe what you want.
Absolutely.
I call it was it the Liberty Valance effect or whatever, when the when the legend becomes truth, print the legend.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, the Lavinia Fisher story is a prime example of a good story not having to be true. What was it? What's the saying? Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. This is a prime example. Lavinia Fisher, when I first heard the story, and you said that you had worked at the old city jail, and when I first heard this story, it was presented to me And in kind of that way, I throw my own inflection on it. Every storyteller changes the story up a little bit to kind of personalize how they tell the story. That's the great thing about storytelling. But the guy that I heard it from, he just delivered it with such, such flair that I honestly felt like these characters in the story were there with us as he was telling it. I could actually see the gallows there in the, yard of the old city jail before we went inside that creepy ass place. And I could see, just imagining it. Lavinia standing on that gallows, looking down and then stepping off and hanging herself. It was just a great moment. And you only get that if you're in the place with the storyteller, hearing the story. You can listen to the podcast all day long, but it is a different experience being there and hearing the story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lavinia tells the preacher that she doesn't want any last rites. And she looks out at the crowd as they ask her for her last words, a noose around her neck. And she says, if you have any messages for the devil, give them to me, for I will be seeing him directly. And then she steps off the gallows and hangs herself.
Jeez.
I mean, cold, right? Absolutely cold.
How has that not been used by Hollywood? Or how has this not been like a motion picture? 'Cause I feel like this is
there's a reason behind it. There's a reason behind it. It's a story that they tell in Charleston.
Mm.
And she's rumored by Charleston to be America's first female serial killer. But when you start digging around, she's not in the list. When you start digging around, you can't find a lot on a white lady named Lavinia Fisher. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, why is that?
Well, because Lavinia Fisher wasn't white.
What?
Lavinia Fisher was actually a freed slave. John Fisher was a very poor man. He did have the inn that he ran, but he wasn't a rich man. Okay, he wasn't as affluent as people. His family wasn't, big money ballers or anything like that. He was just, your average Joe working through time. And he would go and do things at random places, plantations, things like that. And he met this slave woman that he just absolutely fell in love with, Lavinia. She was a slave. And so he paid her master to free her, and then he married her. John Fisher married a black woman in 1806, South Carolina.
No way.
Obviously. Yes, that is exactly what happened. And so John Fisher marries a black woman in 1800 South Carolina, and John's got to make ends meet. And so John resorts to this little thing that, the best of us try to avoid, but those that are really good at it make a lot of money off of it and sometimes become very powerful. We call it crime. John turned to a little bit of crime, and it wasn't anything very serious, but it was enough that he ended up getting caught. And when he ended up getting caught, he ended up being, they ended up drumming up a sentence for him. And the problem was that if they were going to hang John, Lavinia would inherit everything he owned legally. And that would be a black woman owning property in the South in 1806. If they had a child, which Lavinia was rumored to be pregnant, then that child would inherit anything. And that would be a half-black child owning property. And if it was a boy, it would have the right to vote because he was half white in America in 1806. This was a very big problem for some of the religious people there. So they drummed up the charges that Lavinia had to be hung to because she was an accomplice. Lavinia and John were charged with highway robbery. Highway robbery carried was a capital offense. It carried the death penalty back then. There was an argument made that they couldn't hang Lavinia because she was a married woman, and apparently that was taboo back then. And the judge, being very racist, said, well, if we kill John first, she won't be a married woman anymore, will she? And that's why John was hung first, because they wanted to hang Lavinia first. They wanted to get rid of her because she destroyed the status quo. And after she died, her body was not laid to rest. It was given back to her former owner, who then sold it to the Medical University of South Carolina, that they used as kind of like a cadaver, and then they used the skeleton, they used it for teaching. The skeleton was then sold to another university, and eventually, I guess it kind of got parted out, because now there is a woman in Colombia who bought it for $2,000 and has Lavinia's skull.
No way.
It's actually been traced all the way back. So her skull, she's never been buried properly. She was horribly mistreated. And again, you could see why the story that Charleston tells is so different, because it's better to have a murderous psychopath wandering your streets at night as a ghost than to imagine that it is a wrongfully accused innocent woman who you killed because she was a different color.
That is crazy. Now, you say that, I'm surprised that Hollywood hasn't made something like that. I'm actually surprised that they haven't, because I mean, I feel like the story that you told prior to that is the one that they would make. They wouldn't really care, because again, Hollywood only like 1% of it has to be true, and then Hollywood would be like, oh, based on a true story. So I'm actually kind of surprised that they haven't made something like that. That's really interesting.
I think a lot of people try to keep it from getting made, because you have to understand, even when I heard the story, when I first started telling stories, I wanted to get a bit more background. Yeah. And I think Mike can attest to this. The story that they tell in Charleston, it gets told with different inflections and all kinds of things. There's different ways of storytelling and stuff like that. So when I first heard the story, I would always share the story the way that I heard it. And then I started researching the story and everything. And I found out that she was tried for highway robbery. That's what's in the paperwork. And I'm like, well, there's never any proof that she murdered anybody. They just assumed that she murdered people. And so then I started sharing that part of the story. And I was at a convention in 2022. I was celebrating my first book and the beginning of my podcast, Telling Ghost Stories. And I'm sitting with a whole bunch of ghost experts. And Savannah Cash, who is a composer, she's done shows for Spoleto and things like that. And she's working on a Lavinia Fisher show to tell the true story. And she comes up to me, and she's in the middle of me talking about this. And in the audience is the author of My Best Friend's Exorcism, which, if you've seen the movie, the book is even better. He's sitting there in the audience. He's captivated by my story. And in the middle of my story, she just interrupts me and she goes, no, she never actually said that. That's not what happened. And she begins to tell what she discovered by talking with a whole bunch of historians and people like that, including Bruce Orr. And there was just so much that was uncovered that was hidden. The reason why the property was burnt down. Nobody could take the property, because it was owned by someone else. And it was actually the Methodist church in the area that pushed for Lavinia to be killed, because they didn't want a black woman to have that much power. And not that she was any type of, she didn't own any really fine dresses. She wasn't this, she was considered a beautiful woman, but because she was African American, there was a problem. Yeah. And I think that story in and of itself is a story that the city of Charleston will fight tooth and nail to never be told in a setting like Hollywood.
Okay.
I think that there is not a single politician from South Carolina that wouldn't die on the hill that they wouldn't want Hollywood telling that story.
Well, speaking of stories, Clark, you said that you have one?
Yeah, I guess we'll put the addendum on here, and this can be added on, a bonus, or we can include it in the episode. We can do whatever we want, but I'll throw this little tidbit in there, because we could probably do a part 2 on this, talking about the entire history behind the horror kind of thing, because there are so many elements in this story that, like I said, I wasn't going to interrupt a great story, but I mean, because I've told it myself many a time, but there's certain things, if you're a fan of true crime and horror stories and things like that, you start to pick some pieces apart. They sound all too familiar. Things like the mechanical bed. You start getting a little H.H. Holmes in there. You start getting a lot of like Earthnet Bathory in there with the beautiful woman and the missing people being poisoned. You start getting a lot of legendary historical facts kind of thrown into this story, and it just adds on. And like I said earlier, it's almost like a really good game of telephone where people keep adding on to the story until it becomes this like very blown out of proportion, when it probably was a lot simpler and a lot more trimmed down. And yeah, there was probably more political involvement instead of actual bodies piling up. So but that, like I said, that's history. That's a lot of history. But like we said, it's a great story. So I'd
Oh yeah.
know a good story when we hear one, so we're not going to interrupt that. But
yeah, right.
But yeah, my personal story on this. So I was excited when we heard that Jonathan was coming on. He was going to talk about this. So I'm still, if I can find this video footage, I will post it in the Discord. But let's backtrack 20 years. Not to age myself again, but everyone, I think at this point, knows that listens to the podcast. Though I was in college. I would have been 20 or 21 at the time. I think I was somewhere between the ages of 19 and 21 at this time, probably 19 or 20. And I had a friend from high school who at the time was studying film. I was a history major, and I was in Charleston. He was studying film at another school, and he actually now is a Hollywood cinematographer, so good for him. Maybe we can have him on talking about some. He's done an Alien movie recently, so there you go, Stevenson. Maybe you can talk to him about aliens.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can watch the movie
We
and
can
do
pitch him the Lavinia Fisher movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can pitch it to him. He might want to do it. So, but he's done some pretty big documentaries and a few movies with some fairly good reviews and stuff. Maybe not like big summer blockbusters, but we'll have him on and talk about some of his Alien movies and stuff he's been on here recently. But this is back when we were wee ones, and so he would come to visit me, and he brought his camera equipment because he always had a camera with him, of course. And he had this brand new camera. I remember he was all proud of it. He's like, this is like a $3,000 camera and these lenses, and he was so like happy. And he's like, take me downtown and we'll go ghost hunting. And I was like, okay, cool. So at the time I was living in West Ashley, and we cross the river and we go into downtown Charleston, and I'm like, well, let's hit some of the big spots. So we hung out outside of Poogan's Porch, which there's a whole different ghost story. I'm not going to go into that, but I know that Jonathan wants to hear the story behind that one, so I'll circle back around to it. But we hang out there for a while, and we get some interesting anomaly things on video. So we're excited, and we're like, yeah, let's go back out. So we go back out again, and we decide to go to the Old City Jail. So we're on, I believe it's on Franklin Street. Sometimes you'll hear people say it's on a different corner, but I've always known it as Franklin and Broad. For those who are in the area that want to see the Old City Jail. And it kind of comes out of nowhere if you've been there, because Charleston is still very much, its history is kind of intertwined, woven into its modernization. So you've literally got like a little like neighborhood, I don't know what you want to call those little single floor houses that are like right across the street from this old city jail that just kind of this Gothic building that kind of rises out out of nowhere, and it's literally just a block off of Broad Street. So you're like driving, looking at all these pretty houses, and then it's like this old, like city decaying jail that just pops out of nowhere. But you can ride down that side street. I believe it is Franklin off of Broad, and you are driving past the big yard that Jonathan had actually mentioned in his story, where he said he could kind of envision the gallows and all. Well, there actually is an old 19th century like paddy wagon, like it's a big horse-drawn cage, sits out there, and there's like a little stone wall. It's maybe 3.5 feet tall. It's real short. That kind of runs the perimeter of this yard behind the old jail, and we had the camera. We're in a truck, we have windows down, and we're kind of riding the perimeter, and we're just stopping, and we're just kind of filming places. We're like focused on the front of the jail for a while. We decided to focus on the yard out back, and have the camera there for a while. We're sitting there. You can hear us kind of muttering in the background, just making chit chat. And we decide to pull off. We don't see anything, so we drive on. We decide to go back to the house and in the camera and just look at the footage and see what we got. Well, while the camera was on that yard, while we're sitting there just making chit chat, talking, a white mist comes up to the back wall and almost looks like it's putting its hands like over the wall, or resting its hands on top of that little 3.5-foot wall before it just completely evaporates altogether. Never fully forms, but just this like white mist kind of forms into what looks like a person. The face is all blacked out. You can't see anything, but it's very clearly like just a white humanoid form, and you see the arms almost come out and rest its hands on top of the wall before it completely evaporates altogether. And then shortly after that, you see us pull off. Nobody saw anything. We didn't see this with the naked eye at all. Nobody saw a single thing, but we got back. I asked my friend, this is what he does for a living 20 years later still. And he said, that is not a lens flare. That is not light, street lights, anything. There were no cars. I mean, if you've seen where the city jail is, there's not really any way car lights from Broad Street can get back there. I mean, it is dark. It is really dark back there other than the street lights around like the little houses. But we're facing away from that, the opposite direction. He goes, hey, I don't know what to tell you. He goes, I know how much this camera costs, and I know what filters are on it. He said, that is not a lens flare. That's not a trick of light of any sort that I know. And that's all we can leave it as. He said, I can tell you it's not the camera's fault. And
I'm so interested in to see this, see if it's this video or this picture that you have of that. That'd be so cool.
I've been hounding him for decades now to try to dig it out of his piles of footage. He says if he ever finds it, he will get it to me. So hopefully he can stumble across it. Yeah, but yeah, that was just one of the coolest.
I'd love to see it.
It was fascinating. It was cool. There was 3 of us. We were there with it was us, so a film student, a history student, and a first responder. The 3 of us were hanging out. The first responder, oddly enough, he was a no nonsense guy, but he was the only one. Like, we were pretty skeptical. He was the one that was like more on edge the whole time, where he was just like, I see something weird, we're running. So,
look, I'm just going to tell you, I was a first responder for many years. We see some shit, and we know when not to mess around.
Yeah.
I've been to that old city jail. We talked about it before, where I took a tour there back in 2004. It was right after my first marriage. This was actually technically the honeymoon. We decided to go check out ghosts in Charleston. Don't worry, the marriage didn't last long, so I'm not sad about that one. But we went and we toured the old city jail. This is where I heard the story of Lavinia. They take us inside the old city jail, and our group actually they captured orbs on their cameras. We saw some kind of weird mist in the hallway. We heard doors closing, and supposedly we're the only group. We're upstairs. We hear something downstairs, and it was a very eerie experience. And being inside, they put you inside one of those cells in the tour and let you kind of stand there as a group and be like, "This is where they locked people up," and you're like, this sucks. Like, oh yeah, they stuffed like 20 people in here, and I'm like, you got 20 people in here now, and we don't want to be in here. Let us out.
Yeah, and,
So-
to describe it for the listeners too, the inside of this jail is, so it's like a straight up like castle looking building, but when you're inside it, you walk in the door and there's stairs immediately to your right, and it's like the jailer would sit right there, and these stairs kind of spiral up and they go upstairs, and there's 3 levels, and they stuff these, they're just mass jail cells that they would stuff these criminals in based on the severity of their crimes. So first floor is like minor offenders. You were probably drunk in public or something, causing a disturbance. The people in the middle were probably doing something that wasn't necessarily like a capital offense, but maybe a little more serious. And then you have the top level, which obviously there's nowhere to go but down. If you do squeeze through these bars and fall, it's quite a drop. That's why they put them on top. And these people were like, it could be murder, it could be rape, it could be whatever the severity. These are the worst criminals though, but you know, there were some people up there that probably had not committed as bad a crime as some others. So they were just stuck in there with these people. So it was kind of a free-for-all melee, I'm sure, at some times. So not a pleasant place to be.
Yeah, the history of that building has a lot of death and murder, and it's a very bloody piece of Charleston's history. And, you know, there was a time during the American Civil War where that's where they housed POWs. They just threw them in there. And they didn't give them at all any kind of care. They were just like, Yankees, you go in here and you die. And
it was a target. So I don't think people realize Charleston during the Civil War was bombarded heavily. And the blockade that the Union was actually bombarded, they decided to finally turn their guns from military targets to actually civilian targets to just kind of crush the city into submission. And they would have to use the tallest buildings as beacons basically to coordinate fire. So the tallest buildings in Charleston are the churches and then the old city jail. I mean, that's really your only targets. And because nothing until the 80s, there was actually an ordinance. You couldn't build anything taller than the churches, the church steeples. So that's like what was actually used to coordinate fire from the harbor into the city. So the old jail, they were firing probably on their own people, and you know, it is what it is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, war sucks. So.
Yeah, holy cow.
yeah.
And this is late in the war too, when they're already struggling to feed their own troops, much less feed POWs. So you know, it was miserable in there. And it's July and stuff in Charleston. I mean, yeah.
Ugh, gross. Just the heat.
Yeah, it was. I mean, just the amount of people in there with the heat, you know, it would have smelled horrible just from sweat and ass stank, you know, it'd just been horrible. You'd have been like, nope, I don't want to be here.
Well, geez, that's that story. I'm glad you you did both there, Jonathan, with like the like what is told from, you know, like the tours and everything, and like kind of what is online, and then also that piece at the end, like what it actually is. That's really cool that you brought to the table those two pieces of information, and then you too, Clark, with the your own experience and everything like that. I hope we can find that video, or your friend can find that video, so we can take a look at it, because I'm really interested. And it's always cool to have people on that have firsthand experience. And like I say this for everything as far as like, you know, UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, cryptids, things like that. It's like being skeptical about it too. It's so hard, and your brain tries to wrap around or rationalize what you just saw, and I don't know, it's really cool. I'm really jealous because I have yet to have an experience or like see anything, even paranormal. I'm sure when it happens, I'm gonna probably be like, no, that didn't really happen. But no, that's really cool, Clark, that you experienced something like that, and I'm jealous. But no, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on and, you know, shedding some light on this story.
Well, no, thank you guys for having me. You know, and if you really want to have those experiences, all you really have to do is come down to the Low Country of South Carolina. You can throw a rock and hit a ghost. There's a ghost story on every corner in these towns. Charleston, Georgetown, Beaufort, Savannah. These places have got a ghost story about every 10 feet.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. And it's, yeah, especially in the South and everything, there's, oh, I mean, just anywhere, really. I feel like there's, if you just do some digging, I feel like there's every state has their own ghost stories, their own kind of paranormal stuff. I have to look more into it. I have to, get my own experience out there. If there was an alien encounter, I'd be more happy with like an alien encounter or seeing a UFO. That's my bag right there. But no, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any last minute things you want to tell our audience members, or any last, thoughts, anything like that on the topic?
Just if you get the chance to come down to Charleston, you really should take a time to go on some of these ghost tours, like Clark said. If you're going to come down here for the history, get the haunted history. It's a lot of fun. Even if you're a skeptic, the people never let the truth get in the way of a good ghost story, and that's the important thing, is you never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And if you like these kind of stories, that's what we do at the Carolina Storyteller. Every week we've got a new ghost story. And like you said, there are ghost stories in every state, in every country. And I go out and I find them in the night, give them to you. So, shameless plug, Carolina Storyteller.
No, that's fine. Yeah, we're definitely going to get your information. We'll put it in the description. So you, the listener, if you want to get more of this stuff and check out Jonathan's pages, and if you like the audio dramas too, he does have the Chronicles. Correct me. It's the Chronicle. Say it again one more time. It's the
Valmont, the Black Raven Chronicles.
Thank you. And yeah, if you liked what you heard, just remember that he has that stuff out there. Clark, do you have any last minute things for our audience members?
No, I second all of that. I want to thank Jonathan for coming on. And yes, definitely, if it's a vacation spot that you've ever been interested in, definitely check Charleston out. Can vouch for it. Definitely take the ghost tour, even if you're just in it for the architecture or the food. There is something for everyone. There really is. It's a great city.
Oh yeah,
you'll enjoy it no matter what you're into. If it's for the history, if it's for the architecture, if it's for the beach, if it's for the food, like I said, go there. You'll have a great time.
Come down and go run into Bill Murray. Everybody else does. I haven't yet.
Yeah, he owns the River Dogs. Yeah, go see a baseball game. Get a hot dog and see Bill Murray.
And with that being said, remember, we don't want stuff that's normal. We want stuff that's effing weird.
I think I've got enough Lavinia stuff on my podcast. I don't think I need to throw more Lavinia in there.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the very first episode of my podcast. So.
Okay.
It's been revisited like 3 times. So I think if I do another Lavinia episode, my listeners will shoot me.
Okay.
I think
where I go, I do the Lavinia Fisher story.
Good one. I'm actually surprised I've never brought it up to do it on this show. I think I've talked about it on my old podcast that I did solo, but I've never brought it up.